At 31, pregnant and seemingly settled, my life appeared perfect to any outsider. But beneath this veneer, a starkly different reality lurked. Derek, my husband, was a master of public charm. At 38, he was the sort who drew eyes in any gathering. His laugh was infectious, his stories captivating. To the world, we were the idyllic couple, eagerly awaiting our first child. Yet behind the closed doors of our home, Derek's true colors bled through. The affection and warmth he once showered on me had turned into something colder, harsher. His words, once filled with love, now often cut deep. I had become adept at navigating his moods, a silent dance of walking on eggshells. I often found myself reminiscing about our early days, filled with joy and promise. Derek was rock, my confidant, but marriage seemed to unravel him, revealing a controlling and often cruel man. I told myself it was the stress of his job, but deep down, I knew these were mere excuses. The sound of a key in the lock jolted me back to reality. My heart skipped a beat. Derek was home early. Standing up quickly, I adjusted my maternity dress and tried to muster a smile. "Morning, love," Derek greeted, hanging up his coat. His voice was light, but his eyes, cold and scrutinizing, quickly scanned the room. "Good morning," I replied, my voice strained. "I wasn't expecting you so soon." He shrugged nonchalantly and headed for the fridge. "Needed a break from the office. How's the little one doing?" His hand rested on my belly, a gesture that once brought joy, now only discomfort. "He's doing fine," I managed to say. "Good," he said, his gaze lingering on me. "You look tired, Clara. You should rest more." I nodded silently, knowing better than to argue. Lunch passed in an uncomfortable silence. Derek was distant, lost in his own world, while I struggled with my meal. The tension between us was like a third unwelcome guest at the table. Post-lunch, Derek disappeared into his study, leaving me alone with my thoughts. My eyes landed on a family photo on the wall, a painful reminder of the facade we upheld. I felt trapped, a prisoner in my own home. I knew I needed to talk to someone, but who would believe the dark side of Derek, the perfect husband, the successful businessman? I felt utterly alone. As the day wore on, a resolve began to form within me. I couldn't continue living this lie, not for myself and definitely not for my unborn child. I had to find a way out, to expose Derek for who he really was. It was a daunting task, but for the sake of my child, I was ready to do whatever it took. That night, as I lay beside him, I silently vowed to myself I would find the courage to leave, to give my child a life free from this shadow. I needed a plan, a way to reveal Derek's true nature. It was a challenging path, but for my child, I was willing to walk it. I woke up to another day under the same roof as Derek, feeling the weight of my unborn child and the heavier burden of my secret turmoil. The morning was routine. Derek left for work with a peck on the cheek, a gesture so hollow it stung. As the door closed behind him, I allowed myself a moment to breathe, to feel the freedom his absence brought. But this respite was short-lived. Today, I had decided, was the day I would begin to document Derek's true nature. It was risky, but necessary. I needed evidence, something tangible to show the world the man he really was. That evening, as Derek returned, I braced myself. His mood was a barometer for the evening ahead. He came in, his face like a thundercloud. "Evening," I greeted him cautiously. He grunted in response, tossing his keys on the table. "What's for dinner?" I had prepared his favorite, roast chicken with vegetables. I hoped it might lighten his mood. "Roast chicken. It's almost ready." He eyed the kitchen suspiciously, as if expecting a flaw. "Make sure it's not dry this time." I nodded, feeling a knot in my stomach. At dinner, Derek picked at his food, his frown deepening with every bite. "This is bland," he muttered, pushing his plate away. "Can't you do anything right?" I clenched my fists under the table, forcing a calm I didn't feel. "I'm sorry, Derek. I'll try to do better." "You always say that, but I see no improvement." His voice was laced with contempt. I wanted to scream, to tell him how his words crushed me, but I held back. Instead, I quietly cleared the table, feeling his eyes bore into me. Later that night, in the privacy of my room, I took out my phone and began to write everything down. Every harsh word, every dismissive gesture. It felt like opening a floodgate, the words pouring out of me. This diary would be my weapon, a testament to the truth. The next few days were a blur of tension and silent suffering. Derek's mood swung wildly, and I tiptoed around him, capturing every incident in my phone. His disdainful comments, his careless disregard for my well-being. I recorded it all. One evening, as we sat watching TV, Derek suddenly turned to me. "Why are you so quiet these days? You used to be more lively." I met his gaze, my heart pounding. "Just tired, I guess," he scoffed. "You're always tired. What do you even do all day?" His words were like a slap in the face, but I swallowed the hurt. "Taking care of the house and preparing for the baby," I said quietly. Derek laughed, a harsh, mocking sound. "Taking care of the house? Look at this place. You're barely managing." I felt a tear escape my eye, but I quickly wiped it away. This was the Derek that the world needed to see, the one hidden behind closed doors, and I was going to expose him. Each day blurred into the next, a monotonous cycle of dread and resilience. Derek's behavior worsened, his mask slipping more frequently. I continued to document every cruel word, every cold gesture, building my case against him in secret. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Thursday, mundane in every way, until Derek stormed home early from work, his face twisted in fury. "What's wrong?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "The incompetence at work is driving me insane," he yelled, slamming his briefcase on the table. "Can't anyone do their job right?" I stepped back, feeling the walls of the room closing in. "Derek, please, you're scaring me." "Scaring you?" He scoffed. "I'm not even doing anything yet." His words sent a chill down my spine. I knew I had to be careful, to not provoke him further. But it was like walking through a minefield, blindfolded. As I tried to calm him, suggesting he relax and take a break, Derek's rage only grew. He began to hurl insults, each word a dagger aimed at my heart. I retreated to the kitchen, hoping to put some distance between us, but he followed, his anger a palpable force. "You're useless, Clara. Can't cook, can't clean. What good are you?" I stood there, my back against the counter, feeling trapped. My hand found a pair of scissors lying there, a mundane household tool, yet in that moment a lifeline. As Derek advanced, I held the scissors up defensively. "Stay back, Derek, please." The look in his eyes changed then, a flicker of surprise, maybe even fear. He stopped, his rage replaced by something else. Realization, perhaps. He knew he had gone too far. "What are you going to do, Clara? Stab me?" His voice was a venomous hiss. "No," I said, my voice steadier than I felt, "but I won't let you hurt me." We stood there in a standoff, the tension thick in the air. Then Derek laughed, a cold, mocking sound. "You're pathetic," he said, turning away. "Don't think this changes anything." But it had changed something. It had shown me the depth of his cruelty and my own strength. I knew then that I had to act, to bring his true nature to light. That night, after Derek had gone to bed, I sent an email to his boss, attaching excerpts from my diary. I detailed the abuse, the fear, the reality of living with Derek. It was a risk, exposing him like this, but I had reached my breaking point. The next morning, Derek left for work as usual, unaware of the storm that was brewing. I waited, my heart pounding, for the inevitable fallout. It came in the form of a phone call from Derek's boss. He was shocked, apologetic. He had no idea, he said. He promised to handle the situation. Later that day, Derek came home, his expression one of defeat. He had been suspended from work, pending an investigation. The mask he wore so well had slipped, revealing the monster beneath to the world. As I looked at him, I felt a mix of emotions, fear, relief, a sense of justice. This was just the beginning, I knew. There would be more battles to fight, more truths to uncover. But for the first time in a long time, I felt hope. "I know what you did, Clara," Derek said, his voice low. "Yes," I replied, meeting his gaze, "and I'd do it again." The aftermath of my email was like a storm breaking. Derek was a shadow of his former self, his arrogance replaced by a sullen, brooding demeanor. But I knew better than to let my guard down. In the silence of our home, his resentment simmered like a cauldron on the verge of boiling over. Uncle Jack, my late father's brother and the only family I had left, was the first person I reached out to. He had always been a pillar of strength, and I knew I could trust him with the truth. "Clara, I always suspected something was off," Uncle Jack said over the phone, his voice heavy with concern. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" His words were kind, but they stung. I had been too ashamed, too afraid of not being believed. But now I needed him. "I need your help, Uncle Jack. I can't do this alone." "We'll get you out of this, Clara. You're not alone anymore," he assured me, and I felt a glimmer of hope. In the following days, I focused on my plan. I continued to document Derek's behavior. each entry more damning than the last. I also started reaching out to a few close friends, testing the waters, gauging their reactions. Some were skeptical, but most were supportive, shocked by the revelation. One evening, as Derek and I sat in an oppressive silence, he finally spoke. "You've ruined my career, Clara. How could you?" His words were icy, but I detected a hint of desperation beneath them. "I didn't ruin anything, Derek. You did that all by yourself," I replied calmly. He glared at me, his hands clenched into fists. "You think you're smart, don't you? Exposing me, turning everyone against me." I met his gaze steadily. "I'm not turning anyone against you. I'm just revealing the truth." Derek laughed bitterly. "And what about you, Clara? Aren't you afraid of what people will say? The perfect wife, not so perfect after all." I felt a surge of anger, but kept my voice even. "I don't care what people say. I won't be a victim anymore." The days that followed were a tense cat-and-mouse game. Derek's moods were unpredictable, and I found myself constantly on edge, but I was determined to see my plan through. Uncle Jack was a constant support, calling daily, offering advice and encouragement. He also started gathering legal resources, preparing for the inevitable divorce proceedings. I knew the hardest part was still to come. Exposing Derek at his workplace was one thing, but the public humiliation and legal battles that lay ahead would be a true test of my resolve. But I was ready. For my sake, and for the sake of my unborn child, I was ready to fight. As I lay in bed each night, I thought about the future. A life free from Derek's shadow, a fresh start for me and my child. It was a future worth fighting for, and I was determined to make it a reality. The days leading up to the confrontation felt like a countdown to Judgment Day. Each passing hour was laced with a mix of dread and determination. Derek, now aware of his precarious situation, oscillated between sullen silence and fits of rage. Uncle Jack had been instrumental in orchestrating the next phase of my plan. He had discreetly contacted some influential people, laying the groundwork for what was to come. "We need to be strategic, Clara," he had advised. "We strike hard and fast, leaving no room for Derek to manipulate the situation." The day of reckoning arrived unceremoniously. Derek left for work, his expression grim. I knew today would be the day he would face the consequences of his actions. I spent the morning in a restless state, my mind racing with possible scenarios. Then the phone call came. It was Uncle Jack, his voice tense but determined. "It's happening, Clara. Derek's being confronted at work. They're going to suspend him pending a full investigation." A wave of relief and apprehension washed over me. "What about the evidence?" "We've got it covered. Everything you documented, the testimonies from his colleagues who witnessed his outbursts, it's all been presented." I hung up the phone, my hands trembling. This was it, the beginning of the end for Derek's reign of terror. Hours later, Derek returned home. The door slammed shut with a force that made me jump. His face was a mask of fury, his eyes burning with unspoken threats. "You," he spat, pointing a finger at me. "You've destroyed me, Clara." I stood my ground, despite the fear coursing through me. "No, Derek, you did this to yourself." He advanced towards me, but I didn't flinch. "You think you've won, don't you? You think you can just ruin my life and walk away?" "It's not about winning, Derek. It's about the truth. About not letting you hurt me or anyone else anymore." He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You're nothing without me, Clara. You'll see. You'll come crawling back." But I knew I wouldn't. I had seen the depth of his cruelty, and I was done being his victim. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of legal meetings and preparations. Uncle Jack was by my side, guiding me through the process. The divorce proceedings were set in motion, and with each passing day I felt a little more of my old self return. The final hearing was a catharsis. As I stood before the judge, recounting the years of abuse, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. Derek sat there, his usual confident demeanor shattered, unable to refute the mountain of evidence against him. When the judge granted the divorce, ruling in my favor, I allowed myself a small smile. It wasn't a victory, but it was justice. Derek had lost his job, his reputation, and now his marriage. The fall of his tyranny was complete. As I walked out of the courtroom, a free woman, I knew the road ahead would be challenging, but for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. I had stood up to Derek, exposed him for who he truly was, and I had survived. I was ready to start anew, to build a better life for myself and my child. A life free from fear, free from Derek. The seeds of retribution had been sown, and they had borne fruit. The courtroom doors closed behind me, sealing away a chapter of my life that had been marked by fear and subjugation. As I stepped into the sunlight, I felt its warmth as a symbol of the new beginning that lay ahead. Uncle Jack, ever my steadfast supporter, was waiting for me outside. "You did it, Clara," he said, his eyes glistening with unspoken pride. "I did," I replied, the reality of my newfound freedom slowly sinking in. "But I couldn't have done it without you." "We're family," he said, wrapping me in a comforting embrace. "Now let's focus on the future." The days that followed were a blend of relief and rebuilding. The divorce had granted me a significant portion of our shared assets, and Derek was ordered to pay alimony. It was more than just financial security. It was a means to start anew, to provide for my child without the shadow of Derek looming over us. I found a small, cozy apartment in a friendly neighborhood. It was the perfect place to turn into a home, a sanctuary for me and my baby. As I set up the nursery, I felt a surge of excitement, a joy that had been absent for far too long. Uncle Jack was a frequent visitor, helping with the preparations and sharing in my newfound happiness. "You're going to be a great mother," he would say, and I started to believe it. One evening, as I was unpacking a box of books, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Derek. My heart skipped a beat as I read his words. "You'll regret this. You've not seen the last of me." I stared at the screen, feeling a surge of anger mixed with a pang of fear. But then something within me shifted. I was no longer the scared, submissive woman Derek had known. I was stronger now, emboldened by my struggles and triumphs. I typed a reply, my fingers steady. "You no longer have any power over me, Derek. It's over." Sending the message felt like shedding the last remnant of my old life. Derek had lost his grip on me, and I knew that any threats he made were the last gasps of a defeated man. The next few months passed in a blur of anticipation and preparation. The community around me was supportive, and I made new friends, fellow mothers who shared in my excitement and offered their wisdom. Then the day arrived. The birth of my child, a beautiful baby girl, was the culmination of all my hopes and dreams. Holding her in my arms, I felt an overwhelming sense of love and protection. As I looked into her eyes, I made a silent promise. I would give her the life she deserved, full of love, happiness, and freedom. A life so starkly different from the one I had endured. In the end, the dawn of liberation was not just about freeing myself from Derek. It was about breaking the cycle, about building a future where my daughter could thrive, unburdened by the shadows of the past. And in that future, I saw not just survival, but the promise of joy and the endless possibilities that lay ahead. Life with my daughter, Lily, brought a sense of fulfillment I had never known. Each day with her was a gift, a reminder of the new path I had forged for us. She was my little beacon of hope, her laughter and bright eyes a constant source of joy. Uncle Jack was a regular presence in our lives, doting on Lily as if she were his own granddaughter. "She's going to grow up strong, just like her mother," he would say with a twinkle in his eye. As for Derek, he became a distant memory, a dark chapter in my life that had been firmly closed. The last I heard, he had moved away, his reputation tarnished beyond repair. The community that once admired him now knew the truth, and he had lost the respect he so dearly valued. Sometimes, in the quiet moments, I would reflect on my journey. The pain and suffering I had endured at Derek's hands had been a crucible, forging me into a stronger, more resilient woman. I had faced my fears, stood up to my oppressor, and come out victorious. But my story was more than just a tale of survival. It was a testament to the power of hope and the strength of the human spirit. It was a message to anyone suffering in silence, afraid and alone, that change was possible, that they too could break free and reclaim their lives. One evening, as I put Lily to bed, I looked down at her peaceful face and felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. I had fought for this, for her right to grow up in a world free of fear and full of love. As I left her room, the soft glow of the nightlight casting a gentle aura around her, I paused at the doorway. The future was unwritten, a canvas waiting to be painted with the colors of our lives. There would be challenges, no doubt, but I was ready to face them head-on. With Lily by my side and the support of Uncle Jack and my new friends, I felt unstoppable. The scars of the past would always be a part of me, but they no longer defined me. I was Clara, a survivor, a mother, a woman reborn. As I sat down in the living room, a sense of peace settled over me. The struggles I had faced had led me to this moment, to a life filled with promise and possibility. Tomorrow was a new day, and it was ours to embrace. And in that promise of tomorrow I found not just an end, but a beautiful beginning.